So I'm continuing this discussion of why we have myths and why we actually cannot live without myths and stories. We can't survive without them. And I'm going to talk about Helen Keller. I'm going to talk about this concept of relevance realization again, and John Vervaeke. So, it's a mistake to say that it's this simple process. I just perceive the object in the world. Mind, object, grasp, done. Because you can't perceive if you haven't taken in a story or a myth. You can't even see the world, I'm arguing, let alone understand it deeply. And let me take this concrete example of the life of Helen Keller, who was blind and deaf. She wasn't blind and deaf from birth. She had hearing and sight for a little while, but then she lost them when she got sick as a small child. And so she gets taught, as you might know, little by little to learn. And this teacher she had, Miss Sullivan, was working with her because she was this wild child who couldn't really grasp anything that you tried to explain to her, and you had to explain it through kind of symbols and signs, through touch. And she would write in letters on Helen Keller's hand for her doll, D-O-L-L, and Helen would mimic that like an ape, D-O-L-L, but she didn't know what she was doing. She knew that, oh, that somehow corresponds to this toy that I have. And when Miss Sullivan tried to really explain to her further, Helen would just get upset, and one time she got upset and she just dashed the doll to the floor and broke it, and didn't feel any remorse. And this was typical. She didn't have any moral sense. She didn't have any thinking sense. And so one day, after this dashing of the doll, Miss Sullivan takes Helen outside, and it says this in Helen Keller's book: "We walked down the path to the well house, attracted by the fragrance of the honeysuckle with which it was covered. Someone was drawing water, and and my teacher placed my hand under the spout. As the cool stream gushed over one hand, she spelled into the other the word water, first slowly and then rapidly. I stood still, my whole attention fixed upon the motions of her fingers. Suddenly I felt a misty consciousness of something, as of something forgotten, a thrill of returning thought, and somehow the mystery of language was revealed to me. I knew then that water meant the wonderful cool something that was flowing over my hand. I left the well house eager to learn. Everything had a name, and each name gave birth to a new thought." And so this is the beginning of the entry of Helen Keller into the world of intellectual thought. And it just flowed quickly from there. Once she had one word and the concept of words and the concept of language, she could think morally, ethically, and she became a brilliant thinker and writer and speaker. And she, at that moment, she goes back and she finds the doll, and she feels sorrow for having broken the doll. And she starts learning new words: mother, father, sister, teacher, and she comes alive because of language, and by extension, myth. Now, this is just one word, but I think we can kind of macro that from just the word to the myth and the story, and that's what happens to you and I with these myths and stories. The world opens up to us before in a way that it could not before. What does she say? Like of something forgotten. The mystery of language was revealed. There's going to be mysteries revealed to me and you through these stories. And so, taking us back to good old relevance realization, you're really loving that word. We keep talking about it. Figuring out what's relevant, blocking out what's irrelevant, knowing what to aim at, knowing what to value. These are crucial steps in perceiving, because you have thousands and millions of pixels of information. What am I looking at? I mean, even in order to perceive what's in front of you, you need to know what you're aiming at. You need to know, like, what's the figure, what's the background, what's these kinds of things. You see, like, how big am I? How big are these things? What scale are we talking about? And this happens, this relevance realization happens, let's call it two directions, from the top down and from the bottom up. From the top down, big overarching stories, patterns, systems of thought, patterns of behavior, stories. These are from the top down, and they're like these interpretive maps. From the bottom up is the sensory data and all the different pieces of data and colors and shapes and numbers, information. And they're happening both at the same time. It's not that the empiricist thinks, oh, it's all about the bottom up. It's all about empirical sensory data. And like this other stuff, that's interpretive fluff that's not really as reliable or real, or maybe it's even lies and a meta-narrative that we can't trust. And so, no, I'm going to say, no, it's this bottom up and top down and bottom up thing going on at the same time. Another way of thinking about this is in terms of a continuum between two types of people, the autistic person and the schizophrenic person. And I'm just using these people as examples, not of how processing happens in the brain and in the body, and how the autistic person puts a heavy weight on the sensory inputs. So they want the data, they want the details, and they don't block potentially anything out. They're just taking every single detail and they notice everything. And that's both their blessing and their curse. And then from the top down are the schizophrenic people who see patterns everywhere, even when they're like not legitimately there. And conspiracy theorists, for example, they like say, oh, look at that. That's, of course, this is a conspiracy. They're out to get me. And so those are there's a continuum there between these two extremes, the bottom up and the top down. And there's the sweet spot in the middle, which is the mythopoeia sweet spot, where the making of myth and the imbibing of these myths and stories and then the using of them to process our relevance realization as we go through the world. This is where we want to be at. We don't want to be stuck in the autistic mode or in the schizophrenic mode. I mean, extreme autistic and extreme schizophrenic. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with being autistic or schizophrenic, but I'm just using them as ways of thinking about how our attention works, how our cognition works. And so, building on this, Vervaeke says, okay, first you have to figure out what's relevant, what to aim at, what's my story, what's my frame. There's that mythos. And then I go on from there. I can't reduce it to this logicist. I've seen this word, Logicist, like a logicist, computationalist approach, where you're reducing all of this thinking and cognizing by me to just a computer or just a calculator. without the affective, without the desiring, without the storied aspect of my experience. And take a wonderful autistic writer, Temple Grandin, talks about how her own experience of being autistic, for one thing, it allows her to really understand the way a lot of large mammals function, especially cows and horses that she worked with in her professional work, working in that industry, and how, like her, the cow, when it's going through the meat processing plant, notices every single detail and will freak out by just like a little chain that's hanging down. And the humans just, they just block it out. They don't even notice that it's there, but it because of the way the cow is receiving, they cannot not look at it. And the same thing for Temple, and she can see it like immediately. And that's why they paid her a lot of money to work for them to figure out these things. Yeah, so that's that predictive processing. We're sort of, humans, we're kind of predicting what's going to be there, and that allows us to grasp things much quicker. Or like take the Temple Grandin story, like she has a really hard time reading a person's emotions. And because, like, how can you tell if somebody is mad at you? Like something about the eyebrows and like these little things, and like she can see all the details, but she can't see like the big gist of the picture. Or how can you tell if somebody's flirting with you? And it's like these really subtle things, and they just go way beyond Temple, and she, can't see these things. She can't see the patterns there behind all those details. And so the argument again is that mythos lets me see. Story is allowing me to understand and perceive what's really there. And to understand that state of affairs, to see the storied patterns, the frames, the images, to open up the world for me in a way, because it was closed before. And is that a true opening up? Is that a true story that I'm seeing in the world? It's always limited in its truth. It's always limited opening up, obviously, unless you are seeing from a God's eye point of view, where you're seeing like everything at all times. No, we're always seeing in a limited way. And we might be just seeing a very small part, and we might even be misinterpreting. Maybe we could make a total mistake and think like, oh, I think the pattern is this. I think this is a situation where war is called for, but really it's not. We might make a huge misinterpretation of a situation. True. But the only way we're going to get anywhere is through mythos, through story, and through opening up the world. That's the only way the world opens up at all. Otherwise, the world is closed to me if I don't have story, if I don't have narrative, if I don't have pattern. And so this can take place in simple and complex forms of knowing the world. One simple form, and I was going to share my PowerPoint, but I forgot to do that. And actually, I don't even know if I need it now. If I'm here. Oh, there's the Helen Keller quote, but we don't need that. And then the next one, oh yeah, so we're going to get to Vervaeke in a second. So anyway, so here's, or am I going to get to that? Maybe I should do it now. Yeah, let's look at the Vervaeke quote here. Oh, PowerPoint. So, okay. Vervaeke on relevance realization is saying this in this article that he wrote with another person, that it's being able to assess and determine what is relevant about a given situation comes first and is the most crucial cognitive skill in rationality. So in order for me to be rational, in order for me to be reasonable, in order for me to think, to cognize, I need this relevance realization, determining what is relevant about a given situation. I get nowhere without that. And I have this funny picture, which I found, of a pattern. And you can sort of, it's kind of like emerging there, or devolving, depending on how you look at it. And so, there's like a circle here, there's hand to hand to hand to hand, and you can sort of see, but then it sort of changes into different patterns, but it's a pattern. And it's a discernible pattern. And so, in a messy world. So is it a real pattern, or is it just all mess? And no, the world is messy, but there are real patterns that we can discern in it, even though they're not perfect or like completely mathematically precise. They are nevertheless there. And then so Vervaeke has this second statement about the general developments in cognitive science away from logicist computationalism, there's that word logicist, and propositional cognition, and towards the 4E approach of viewing cognition through embodied dynamism. So 4E cognition. So this is his theory of cognition. And the 4Es, gosh, they stand for embodied, enacted, I forget what all the 4Es are, but they have to do with the fact that, well, I'm not just a thinking thing purely computationally, but it's also through my body, it's through my inaction, it's through other stuff related to these 4Es. There's 4Es. I forget what they all are. So good, and that's going to be Tolkien again. But let's get back to thinking about this as a simple cognition. And so when it's me, let's keep it simple. It's me and I'm looking at a tree. And so it's not moving, I'm not moving. Keep it simple. What is going on here? Why do I need mythos to understand and even to see that tree? And I look out at the window. I see the tree. And these great philosophers like Aristotle would tend to reduce it to mind, object, match. Done. That's all it is. The mind and the object, they're in congruence to the same form. Therefore, I know the thing. I know. I have truth. Okay, there's a lot of truth in that statement, but I want to go beyond that to the storied element, to perceiving patterns, which are there, but they're also partly coming from me. And then this dialogue between the subjective and the objective that's always going on in this knowing. And I had this example of a woman looking at a tree, which is kind of a funny story from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And anyway, this is a funny example, but I think it's useful, where he's talking to this woman. All these people are obviously being tortured, and most of them are going to die in these concentration camps. And they know that. And this woman knows that, and she's sick and she's dying in this, I think it's like in a typhus ward. And he's a prisoner, but he's also, because he's a doctor, he's helping take care of the other prisoners. And this woman tells him this story. She knows that she's going to die in the next few days. But when I talked to her, she was cheerful in spite of this knowledge. I am grateful that fate has hit me so hard, she told me. In my former life, I was spoiled and did not take spiritual accomplishments seriously. Pointing through the window of the hut, she said, "This tree here is the only friend I have in my loneliness." Through that window, she could see just one branch of a chestnut tree, and on the branch were two blossoms. "I often talk to this tree," she said to me. I was startled and didn't quite know how to take her words. Was she delirious? Did she have occasional hallucinations? Anxiously, I asked her if the tree replied, "Yes." What did it say to her? She answered, "It said to me, I am here, I am here, I am life, eternal life." So when this woman sees and perceives the tree, she has a story in mind. And because she not only has a story, but she has the story of her life, which is coming to an end. And so this is a fundamental aspect of every story, which is facing mortality. And up until now, all people die, and maybe that might change in the future. I kind of doubt it, but and even if it would be possible, I wouldn't want it. But death is this fundamental fact that is built into every story and is built into the fabric of human experience, and that's how she's looking at this tree. And she's able to gain so much more out of it than just like that there's a tree there. She sees life. She sees a friend. She feels comfort in the moment of her own dying. And so, anyway, in this simple example, person and tree, even that's super complex in the story form. But let's take an even more complicated story, which is from Tolkien's The Hobbit. And in The Hobbit, you might recall, Bilbo Baggins is at home in his comfortable hole, and he's kind of like a classic middle-aged or youngish, comfortable person who doesn't want to upset their comforts and their creature comforts, the nice warm and food and tea and nice, very comfortable situation. And these dwarves come in at the beginning of the story, and they're challenging him, asking him, "Hey, maybe you can help us go slay this dragon and win back our family's property that was stolen." And that's like, sorry, man, I've got my comforts here. How much is this going to cost? How long is this going to take? How much are you going to pay me? Like all these things, he's very businesslike in his conversations with them. And yet, when he hears a story, he changes into a new person. Well, he's the same person, obviously, but he almost takes on a whole new identity. And it's not just hearing a story, it's an embodied, ritualized story. And so it's the story of these dwarves and how they were robbed, how their grandparents and parents were attacked and robbed, and they were sent into exile, and now they can't go home, but they want to go home. And they sing this song, and you may have heard it, and there's a film version of this. And I one of these days I'll learn it. I can't sing it right now, but it's that song about the misty mountains old, far over misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day, to seek the pale enchanted gold, and so forth. And so these dwarves are telling this story, singing this song. The story's in the form of the song. It's dark, the lights are low, the fire is crackling. This is very kind of primeval. And then there's some musicians like playing some harps and flutes, and then they're singing this as a choir, maybe in multi-voices. And it's beautiful, and it's moving, and it's ritualized, and it's communal, and it's bodies moving in unison. And this is how Tolkien describes how Bilbo responds to this enacted myth. As they sang, the hobbit felt the love of beautiful things made by hands and by cunning and by magic moving through him. A fierce and a jealous love, the desire of the hearts of the dwarves. Then something tookish woke up inside him, and he wished to go and see the great mountains, and hear the pine trees, and the waterfalls, and explore the caves, and wear a sword instead of a walking stick. He looked out of the window. The stars were out in the dark sky above the trees. He thought of the jewels of the dwarves shining in dark caverns. Suddenly in the wood beyond the water a flame leapt up, probably somebody lighting a wood fire, and he thought of plundering dragons settled on his quiet hill and kindling it all to flames. He shuddered, and very quickly he was plain Mr. Baggins of Bag End Underhill again. So he has a moment of inspiration, of being united to these dwarves, of being one of them, of having the deep desire to go forth into adventure and danger. And then the danger hits him, he's like, oh, then he draws back. But we know that he does, in fact, go with them. And not only does he go with them, he becomes a leader of them. He helps save them from these huge, dangerous trolls at one point, although it's Gandalf ultimately who saves them. He ends up saving the other dwarves when they're captured by a bunch of huge spiders, and he goes and he kills these spiders, but with his own hands and his sword, and he becomes a warrior. And then he goes and he faces the dragon alone. And this is this little guy who was comfortable at home before. Now he's like this hero, soldier, warrior. And something similar happens to his nephew Frodo and Sam and, of course, Lord of the Rings. So this is this ritualized story transforming him, giving him an identity. Now he's one of them. Their story is his story. And he becomes a poem. And this is the art of life. And so this is very Wildian, where he's performing it and bringing it to completion. So so this is myth. And the Greeks, of course, had their embodied rituals, which was how they did their Greek tragedies and comedies. They were all part of a religious ritual, like an all-day thing, multi-day event, everyone together in communion, in communal dance with music, and the Native Americans with the buffalo dance, and this is how they're relating to their environment, and even as well as to the buffaloes. They've got the mythic story about the Indian maiden who marries the buffalo, but then her dad tries to get her back. Like, these myths and these rituals are all together, or the Jewish the Passover with the 4 cups and this ritual meal, and there's like these bitter herbs, which is like representing the sorrow of being enslaved by Egypt, and then there's these different steps you go through, and there's the arm, which is represents the arm of God coming to save us, and so forth. Like so this is all ritualized in these different cultures, and so to some extent to us today, through what? Through consumer culture, through the consumer culture of things like going to a mall and going through the rituals of walking through those portals and lighting and music and mannequins like statues of beautiful images, or like the movie theaters or concert halls, and you look at watch a crowd at a concert, it's a religious experience. It's very ritualized, and people emotionally uniting with each other and being moved and then moving in unison and everything else like that. Um, and so this shapes your identity. And this is why we need myths. This is why we can't live without myths. And it's going to work partly through consumer culture in this modern world. There's no other way to do it. This is where our rituals lie. I mean, they lie in temples and mosques and churches as well, but a lot of them are in the consumer world. And that's where we're going to have to find them and work with them.